Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here. And what I want to talk to you about is a couple of issues that will add on to what you've heard so far, and that is the global resource assessment and then more on safety and environmental issues. Many of you have seen this graph before, and we've talked about it some already this morning about what's going to happen in the future in North America in terms of our gas production. And that purple wedge you see there is shale gas. And there's no question that as we go forward in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we're going to be producing more and more gas from unconventional reservoirs. And it looks like now shale gas is the resource that's going to make the biggest difference in terms of gas production. We are fortunate in the United States, and I think it was mentioned that we're probably the university on unconventional resources. Many of us have been working on unconventional resources for 40 years, so it's not actually all that new. And what you find here is there's about 25 basins in North America that have substantial information on conventional oil and gas, tight gas, shale gas, and coal bed methane. What you see here is just a map of the shale gas plays, but if you overlay the tight gas plays and the coal bed methane plays, we have an enormous amount of information on the resource assessment and the technology required to develop these resources. So a few years back, we formed a group at Texas A&M to study these basins and try to correlate the information we had in the United States on these 25 basins on conventional oil and gas reservoirs, the volumes, the oil in place, the gas in place, the reserves, the recovery efficiencies in conventional reservoirs, and correlate that to the resource assessments that have been going on for 20 or 30 years in the unconventional resources. And we actually have developed some very good correlations based on the data we have right now. Now, if you go back and look at the literature, the only global resource assessment in the literature came from Rogner, and it's the data were back in the early 90s, middle 90s, so it's almost 20 years old. But Rogner did a very good job, and as you can see, when you add it all up, he came out with 32,000 trillion cubic feet of gas in place. That's not recoverable, that's not economically recoverable or technically recoverable. That's gas in place. Well, that is an enormous number. But in the United States, in North America, he came up with about 8,000 trillion cubic feet. Well, on the basis of what we've learned in the last 5 or 10 years in the Barnett, the Marcellus, the Haynesville, the Eagle Ford, the Woodford shales, just all the shale work we've done in the last 5 or 10 years, it's clear that the Rogner assessment, even though it's very good work at the time, is really conservative. So we went back and we studied the 25 North American basins and statistically looked at, we didn't make up any numbers, we took numbers from the literature and from the public domain, and we came up with statistical correlations, and this is out of a dissertation that was just published, and this is the P50. We looked at the P10, P50, and P90 numbers, and what this shows is that in our assessment, the gas in place number, which is OGIP on your left, is more like 125,000 trillion cubic feet, and which is much more than the 32,000, of course, that Rogner had. But there's a lot of information about what's technically recoverable. We've done some work on that. It's also, there's a lot in the literature from IHS and from the DOE and the EIA, et cetera. And so we've come up with a technically recoverable resource in the world for all three types of unconventional resource, more like 57,000 TCF. Now, it's not economic recoverable. We're going to probably talk about that more. You have to have the markets, you have to have the service industry, you have to have the price. But the bottom line is we're not going to run out of natural gas anytime soon. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. The other thing is we have to do it responsibly. And we've talked about that already this morning. The Department of Energy had the Secretary of Energy Advisory Board had a subcommittee, and I was fortunate enough to be on that subcommittee. And the charge of that subcommittee was to come up with how can we develop this shale gas reservoir in an environmentally responsible way and safely do so. And the report is, I think, a very balanced report, and all the constituents, the industry, the NGOs, the regulators, state and federal, pretty much thought the report was dead on in terms of what we have to do. We first started off by making sure that the report said shale gas is extremely important to the security of the United States, but it's also, a global commodity, it's global impact, et cetera. And that the shale gas has a lot of positive impacts on the economy, and that we need to take this seriously and develop shale gas properly. But there are certain things we're going to have to do as the industry to make this happen. One is we have to improve public information on operations by putting more data on the internet. And we've done that with fracfocus.org and some other internet-based communication tools. We've got to improve the communication between the state regulators and the federal regulators. We have to improve our quality, and we've got to take care of the aquifers and make sure we're protecting the water quality. And that's when you go into an area, take some baseline measurements on the aquifers, find out what really the state of the freshwater aquifers are, and then monitor the casing and cementing and make sure you're doing it properly. There was a lot of clamoring about let's disclose what kind of toxic soup you're pumping in those wells. Well, we're doing that now, and as you saw, Dave Lassar drank some of it. So it's really it's not toxic at all. And once we've started disclosing all these chemicals, things have quieted down at least somewhat. One of the issues that probably does need to be addressed was reducing the amount of diesel fuel and the emissions. After a few meetings on that committee, it was clear to me that what upset the people most, especially in Pennsylvania, was all the diesel trucks running by their house day and night. And we need to reduce the amount of truck traffic and diesel emissions. And some companies have gone about doing that by converting their trucks and their rigs over to running off of natural gas. And you can see that since we had like 3 university professors on that committee, we also added fund R&D to achieve recommendations, because that's just, that had to be in there. So you can find out, there's 2, I think, very good reports on this. One is called a 90-day report, and the other one is a 180-day report, and it's at shalegas.energy.gov. And all of our meetings were filmed and broadcast, and there's tens of thousands of documents there, more than you ever want to read. But those two reports, I think everybody that's doing shale gas development needs to download those two reports and read them. They're full of a lot of good information, and it's something I'm proud of. So in conclusion, the shale gas resource is enormous, and it can be very, very important to the economics of North America and indeed the world. Shale gas can be developed in a safe and environmentally acceptable manner, and I believe it is, but we need to continue working on it. The industry needs to work more with regulators and NGOs to develop best practices. When we have an SPE meeting and we're just talking to each other about being environmentally responsible, that's good, but it would be better to have in the audience or on the program representatives of government and NGOs. We also concluded that states should be the primary regulators of oil and gas. The state organizations know what they're doing, and they know what's best for their local area. And that our subcommittee report is a blueprint on what needs to be done to develop shale gas in a responsible manner. Thank you.